Alright guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about when to not rune something violent. Basically what we're going to be talking about here is mostly focused on PvP. There's a lot of reasons not to rune things violent that are PvE focused, certain mechanics in certain fights, but we're going to be focusing on PvP. So, spoiler alert, I rune everything violent that I can. If I say violent is the, sort of the engine, the secret to my success, my best runes are violent. These are some of my best runes by slot. Those are slot 2. Here's slot 3. So you can see the speed on those versus the speed of my pool in general. There's a 26, 25. There's my first violent. Violent runes are fantastic. And basically what they do that I think everybody knows, but it's as if you added a third or fourth or fifth skill to a unit that said 22% chance cannot be crowd controlled. That's an indispensable skill. If they added that on to a 2-set, people would run that as a 2-set everywhere. And unable to be crowd controlled is a little bit misleading, but it means 1-turn crowd control. There's a few instances of 2-turn crowd control, but it's fairly infrequent. Totally immune to 1-turn crowd control, 22%. That's why they nerfed it in RTA. It used to be you could proc as many times as 22% would allow you. Now you can proc once. So people would set up these intricate strategies that required multiple units, and then they would just get RNG'd into that doesn't matter because dice. We rolled dice and you lost. So that's unfortunate. But that's the main beauty of violent, the inability to be crowd controlled, because crowd control is so great. It also, it lets you cycle skills faster, which is insane, the cooldowns. If it procced and you didn't cool down every turn, it would be a slight nerf to it, but it would still be fantastic. So there's a lot going for it. Getting to do a little bit of burst damage. If you have 2 units back to back, 22%, those 2 units took 4 turns, which is as much as the entire enemy team. And if they were the right 2 units, you might have killed one of their units. So it's just really, really, really good. But there are some instances where I don't feel like violent is the way to go. So we're going to cover those really quickly. Well, maybe not really quickly. We're going to cover those. Why am I looking in here? We don't need to look in here. So let's take a look. Units that I have that are not runed violent. Okeanos. He is swift. I want him to go first. I want him to reset anything that needs resetting. There's another reason that I'm going to dig into in a second, but anything you want to go first. The alpha strike units, the bar buffing units. So Okeanos is one. Amelia is another. She is a immunity unit. I want to put immunity turn 1. She gets a bonus to her speed when she's human form. And it's based on her speed as well. So you turn her into a human, she becomes way faster than 285 speed. Like in the 300s, it's great. So that's another reason. Other units on Swift, Bastet is a bar booster. She will help speed tune your team, help everybody in your team go first, even if they are not fast enough to normally do that. So bar boosters, specific go first units, that sort of thing. Now, I don't have a ton of units on Swift. And I don't feel like you need a ton of units. I mean, you can see there's Amelia. And then looking across the board, there's really no other units I use in PvP in slot 1. There's Okeanos. And apparently no one else. That's weird. Am I on speed? Yeah, that's strange. So Okeanos, Amelia. Amelia, Okeanos. So we've got just a couple, like 3. And you don't need that many. Units with high base speed would be the next unit that you might consider putting on Swift. It just pushes them into a new stratosphere. I ran a Swift Ganymede for a while. Now he's on Violent, but you can see what the base speeds do for him on Violent. 267, 270 on Violent. But on Swift, he is over 300. He's outspeeding Wusas because of his base speed. I mean, they're pretty similar, but if you build him correctly, he can outspeed a Wusa, which is horrible for a Wusa to not go first. Wusa is another one to go first. It's a combination of the high base speed and the immunity buffer. You want to put up that shield, put up the immunity, use that high base speed. It's great. So that would be a reason to not go violent. And in terms of PvP, in my opinion, there's violent, there's swift, and there's despair as your main sets. And despair is also used very sparingly, but it's for units that don't need swift for other reasons and can benefit from the despair. Ethna is one of those. That's her AoE. Very nice. And she has the incredible base speed of 119. So despair, I don't have a lot of units on despair. I ran my Aegir on despair last rune removal, and that was pretty nice. Triton, another one on despair. He's a bar booster in reverse. You could run him on Swift for the same reasons as Bastet, though his bar reduction has to go through an accuracy check, whereas her bar boost doesn't. So a little bit worse in that regard, but it is a physical hit, which benefits Despair. He has 2 AoEs that physically hit, so they benefit from Despair. So it's another one to run Despair. Gemini, another nice one to run Despair. And then, Praha. Praha is a little bit interesting. She has an AoE, and you kind of want to give her just a little bit of oomph. Violent Praha, I think, would be also viable because you're waiting to use her impactful turns, her 2 and her 3. And really, if you're using her 3 a lot, you're probably in trouble. So we've talked about Swift, we've talked about Despair, and then the last thing I want to talk about is when you don't get the full benefit of the turn. All units that proc will get the benefit of procking out of the CC, so that's super great. But there's some units that when they proc, they don't get 100% of a turn. And if you have to choose between 100% of a turn or less, it makes sense to maybe not be on violence. So looking back at Okeanos, his skill 3, when he stuns, he gains 25% bar. So if he gets a full team stun, he's back to 100% bar. If you proc after that skill, you are getting 0 benefit of the turn advantage of the violent. He already had a full turn. You procced, you kind of cancel that out. You still get the benefit of the cooldown reduction. You still get the benefit of avoiding the stuns and the crowd controls and stuff like that. But that's another benefit of Okeanos is, every time you use his 3rd, you're getting a violent benefit of a turn without having to rune violent. So that's kind of nice. And another example, and a lot of these units you'll see are not rune violent for multiple reasons because sometimes it's hard to not rune something violent for just one reason, which is obscene that the runes are so good that if you have a good reason to not rune it, that might not even be enough. You need like 2 good reasons. So the Ethna as well, the skill 2, very similar to Okeanos. When it crits, the bar increases by 10%, and if it crits twice on multiple units, you're getting 20, 40, 60, 80%, a lot of bar, right? So you're getting the benefit of the Despair on AoE, the Despair chance, which is robbing turns from your opponent, and you're getting the benefit of gaining yourself another turn quickly. You're cycling turns in a violent type manner at a better percentage, really, when you use the skill 2, especially that short little cooldown. You're cycling through turns, you're gaining bar, and if you proc after a shatter, I mean, you probably are not as happy with that as if you proc after a capture or a wound. So you have a 1 in 3 chance of having a not as great turn advantage type proc. So that's why you would rune her not on violent. The other unit that I think is going to be a little more controversial, but I personally believe is not as necessary to rune on violent is Aegir for PvP. I've seen some violent ones. I've fought some violent ones. I've never runed mine violent, so that I'm not as great of a person to talk to about that. But he's on broken right now. I had him on Despair before to give him a little utility like Ethna, but look at these skills. When you use the skill, you get 50% bar. That's pretty good. So if you proc after the skill, you're only gaining 50% of the turn proc, which 50% is still good, but it's only 50%. So, I don't know. Not full value, right? The skill 3 is also interesting. You absorb the enemy's attack bar by 50% each. That could be 100% bar. More likely, if you're taking off immunity, it's maybe a 50% bar or maybe 0. So 50 to 100%, 50%, and then this is the only one that doesn't give you a percent bar. So, I think Violent, people are going to try to burn him down and control him, so Violent will proc you out of those resets, the stuns, the sleeps, all that stuff, which is great, and maybe is enough worth it, even though you're not getting the full bar here. But, I mean, mine's function pretty well, not on Violent, because of how much turn cycling he does. The other fantastic thing about this is after Confiscate, his attack speed goes up, which I think is 35 speed flat that you gain. So mine is 243. When he has his 3rd on cooldown, it's plus 35, so 278. That's super fast and kind of helps you. It's almost like he's on Swift, right? 278. It's almost like he's on Swift, has some of the characteristics of Violent with his 3rd and 2nd, and he's rolling. But, when you have him on Violent, it almost seems like he's proccing time after time, because if he procs on his 1, it leads into his 3, which then might grab 50 to 100% bar, moves on to his 2, 50%. And I'm of the opinion that you pretty much want to have this 3 on cooldown all the time, even if you don't have a great target. It'll come back quick enough, and the benefit of the speed and the heal, I think, is worth it, even if you don't have a great target. So I try to use that as much as humanly possible. I mean, that's kind of the only thing. Chilling, I don't think, is as good on Violent, but, I mean, he is good on Violent. I like to have him a little bit faster so that he's cycling through his removal and stuff like that. So, that's kind of my thought. I've seen some Molongs On Swift, if they're part of like a Molong Icarus, nuke it down kind of a team, you want to speed tune via Swift. But yeah, other than that, I think there's a reason to make everything violent, but I think those are the reasons you might consider to not rune something violent. I mean, I guess we could go into Verd too, right? Just quickly. Double, triple despair is also a great build for Verd because you might be gaining more turns than you would on violent. If they're hitting him every time, you have a 45% chance of taking a turn, but, you know, he's going to be a burn target. So 22% versus 45% or 30%, a little bit better. But then again, the stun is crippling because you can't get out of it. So just some thoughts. I'd be curious what you guys think. And, you know, if I missed some obvious example, I apologize. I don't have every unit, and I don't consider every unit. So just giving it my best try. Thanks for watching, y'all, and I will see you next time. Take care.